Thank you all to those that have come. We'll be starting in just a few minutes. Have a seat or stay seated, standing. Just relax. We'll be starting shortly. All right, folks. Zach, it's all you.
Thank you, Ayana. I believe we were going to start with Nate giving an introduction to the center.
Yeah. So just real quick, thanks everybody for joining us today for this event. We look forward to the panelist discussion and presentation. Wanted to first let you know that as part of this event, every year in conjunction with the College of Ag and the College of HHS, we choose a local charity to benefit with donations. This year we have chosen the Hannah Center, which is a local charity here. And I have a couple of videos to share from folks at the Hannah Center that kind of talking about what they do and their mission. So I'll share the first of those now.
Hello, my name is Tracy Fuller, and I am the Executive Director of the Hannah Community Center. The Hannah Community Center prides itself to serve low-income minority youth, seniors, and family. We do this for a variety of our programs, which consist of our senior programming, our after-school, which focuses on our LSC students, as well as our summer camp, which focuses on LSC and TSC. We are also a proud supporter of the Indiana Minority Health Coalition, where we integrate our healthy initiative throughout our programming. If you have any additional questions or concerns, feel free to send us an email at info@hannahcntr.org. Have a great day.
So that was one video, and I've got another one real quick here to share from one of the after-school counselors.
Hello, my name is Jasmine. I am an after-school counselor here at Hannah Community Center. And our main goal for the after-school program is to help our kids grow academically, especially in math and reading. We also provide snacks, homework help, arts and crafts, and food demonstrations that they really like. We also have partnerships with organizations such as Girl Scouts, Junior Achievement, Indiana Minority Health Coalition, Purdue Vet, Purdue Extension, and the Lafayette Police Department. And with each of these organizations, they encourage our kids' abilities to grow intellectually and in their own way. And there is definitely something here for everyone to enjoy and to feel accepted in. So thank you so much.
So I will post in the chat. We're working with them. You can make a monetary donation to them through their website, or they have some supplies that they need for the programs that they're offering for low-income youth, minority youth, and seniors in our community. So I will post that into the chat. You can take any supply donations that you may wish to give directly to the center. I will put the address in the chat as well. We're going to be continuing this drive into February. It's not just tied to the events of this week, so you'll be getting some additional communications about that through the college. If you if you need a reminder later on or have some more things you'd like to donate that you think of, feel free to do that. And thanks in advance for considering that. And now I will turn it over to Zach to kick off today's event. Thanks.
Thank you, Nick. So good afternoon, good morning, greetings to everyone. We are happy to have you join us today, whether that's from California, Indiana, another country, your home, or even a car. We're just glad to see you on Zoom. Welcome to the Black, Queer, and Trans Leadership and Civil Rights panel. I'm Zachary Brown, Assistant Director for Student Recruitment and Retention within the Office of Multicultural Programs here in the College of Agriculture. And today, I have the honor to serve as the moderator for this panel discussion. This event is again part of the 2021 College of Ag and College of Health and Human Sciences Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Week. Today, we'll be exploring how communities of color that face the most severe marginalization can most clearly see the cracks that demand attention and how history has rarely given them due credit for their civil rights victories. Our esteemed panel of Black, trans, and queer advocates will help us evolve our understandings by connecting historical achievements to contemporary aims, and they will offer suggestions on how you can engage in racial justice movements. And, normally we read a long bio, but instead, any introduction I could give to each of these panelists wouldn't be enough, because that's just how amazing they are. So we are going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and to tell the attendees a bit about the work that they do within their community. And so to start things off, I want to ask Remy to begin for us.
Okay, so my name is Remy Thomas. I am non-binary, so I do use they pronouns. I'm an artist, entrepreneur, but the work that I am working on right now in the community is training people to be more productive so that they, one, take care of themselves, and then two, start to create change in their communities.
Thank you, Remy. And then can we go to Denari, please?
Hi, everyone. Excuse the dog. My name is Denari Grace. My pronouns are she and they, and I strongly prefer that people mix it up regularly if they can remember to do that. I am a born and raised New Yorker, and I am currently based here. I am also non-binary and bi. And I am a blues singer-songwriter, a poet, a screenwriter, a freelance writer and editor, a ghostwriter, and a public speaker, educator, and activist. Most of my activism is around I+ identity and community needs, around disability justice, around fat liberation, and sort of the intersection of those things with Blackness, with class, with gender, and all those other lovely things. So I've been doing activist work of various kinds for about 13 years, starting as a student activist at Rutgers University in New Jersey, where I attended undergrad. And a lot of my work is centered on the arts, building community through writing, through music, as well as educating community on different community issues, on history, in order to move us forward. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much. And then we are going to go to Reg, AKA the Notorious Pink.
Thank you so much, Zachary. Can I be heard okay?
Yes.
Excellent. I'm Reg, AKA Notorious Pink. I'm queer, non-binary. I use they pronouns. I'm an artist, an educator, a writer, community organizer. Most of my work is centered on anti-oppression, particularly with queer folks with in terms of race. I'm also the co-president right now of the Pedagogy and Theater of the Oppressed organization. I do a lot of stuff. I work with age groups from preschool, to senior citizens. I'm really glad to be here. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have Romeo.
Hi, everyone. My name is Romeo Jackson. My pronouns are they and them. Currently, I'm the Assistant Director for Social Justice at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, who I am not representing in any official capacity today. As my hoop falls out, it sensed the shade and was trying to run away from me. Most of my work has centered in higher education, really at the intersection of wanting to center the needs and experiences of queer and trans students of color in higher education. My research, writing, and practice explores the intersection of anti-Blackness, solar colonialism, and gender and sexuality. Outside of that, I primarily identify as an educator and trainer who's committed to developing people who are community organizers, who are artists, because I am none of those things, and super fortunate to be on a panel full of those folks right now.
Thank you. You can't tell, audience, this is a panel that I'm truly honored to be able to moderate for. They are so experienced in so many different ways and provide me with my own aspirations of things I want to reach in the future. And I do want to point out one quick note in the chat. If you have any questions throughout this panel, please be sure to send them to Nick Rogers. He will be helping to facilitate the question and answer period as we get to the end of the panel. I do have a few questions that I will take us through as we go through things, but if you think of anything, again, please send a straight direct message to Nick Rogers. You can find how to message him in the chat box. So to kick things off, we really want to talk about how many of our attendees today may be unfamiliar with the ways queer and trans experiences intersect with Black experiences. I want to ask each of our panelists, or those that want to contribute to this question, to talk a little bit about how living at this intersection has helped to shape their life.
Okay, don't everybody jump at once. I'll tell you a bit about my experience. So the social scientist Brene Brown has a book called Braving the Wilderness, and she describes living with integrity to your beliefs and who you are as just going out into the wilderness. It's wild. Not everybody's going to appreciate what it is that you have to bring to the table. And that is the most accurate description I can ever bring to explaining how being Black and being trans, and then I have additional mental and physical disabilities. So I had no choice but to live my true life. If I can't lift a box, everyone knows I can't lift a box. And a totem pole is a very bad description to describe oppression, but there are some occasions where it feels like you're right there at the bottom. For instance, explaining to my family that I needed to do a legal name change and change my birth certificate was kind of a fight. It was a little bit of a struggle, and things that you don't think would interact suddenly interact. For instance, going to my stylist, there are aspects of my life that I cannot discuss with her that I normally would had I not had the trans experience added to my roster. We'll call it that.
I'd like to talk about it briefly. I'm in my 50s, and when I was growing up, there wasn't even language for the way I was experiencing my life. It's really only been in the last 15 years that there's been language for me to even talk about, including the word intersection, right? So I would say for me, it's been a matter of the way my body has been a target as someone who performs, maleness and appears, Black in terms of that language. I mean, I feel like that language is becoming is finally opening up in terms of, you know, the entire diasporan experience. And then as a person, I mean, queer wasn't even an option. You know, it was either you behaved according to your assigned gender, or you experienced, or I should say I, because I'm sure other people have different experiences. I experienced a lot of violence. So I think that would be the term for me that has that captures the experience at that intersection. It's you know, extreme violence.
I think I would just add, I think about Audre Lorde's quote a lot, that if I don't define myself for myself, I'll be crushed under other people's fantasies and eaten alive. And particularly before I went to undergrad, I had no context of Black, queer, and trans communities, what that meant. You know, I was raised in a Black community where gay people existed on the peripheral, right? Definitely not centered. And so it has always already informed everything about my life and continues to, you know, the work I do, how I love, how I resist, how oppression manifests. And what was key for me in my own identity development was no longer feeling the need to parse that out for people. We're no longer saying like either I will be Black or queer, simply saying I'm all that at once, as well as a magnitude of other identities that kind of shape how I navigate the world, right? It's become a powerful analysis, right, of Black cis het communities and of white, queer, and trans communities, that has also sharpened my analysis of where I think we need to go as a community if we truly value liberation.
Yeah. One thing that kind of was sparked for me from this question was the idea of culture. For me, a major way that Blackness and queerness and transness intersects is through the culture that we create. And for me, the personal joy, you know, we talk about Black boy joy, Black joy, those conversations that we've been having the last few years. The joy that for me that comes up from that creation of culture, from that upholding and sort of, you know, elevation of culture, the contributions that we have made to culture, and also the ways that we engage in the culture, right? Because so much of Black, queer, and trans culture has been commodified, has been stolen, has been used and abused and obliterated and turned into a mess because people don't know how to use the language. And all of those sorts of things. But when you get to engage authentically with other folks in that culture, for me, that's been a big way that it has manifested in my life. You know, as I said, I started this journey as an activist, as a student leader, a queer student leader at Rutgers. And I was specifically in community with quote unquote people of color. But for the most part, you know, when we were starting out, the organization was pretty much just Black folk. And so I kind of had that foundation of, you know, hanging with community. What's the word I'm thinking of? You know, fellowshipping with community, and you know, everything from, you know, just having on campus, you know, events to traveling into Manhattan, you know, and going to predominantly Black and brown clubs, you know, and dancing to our music and seeing our people. And so for me, that's been a really big part of how I've developed my identity, how I engage, how I, you know, so it's sort of like I have this standard you know, and nothing else really meets it. And so being in space and in community with other folks who are not just queer and trans, not just Black, but both of those things together has been a really important part of my life experience and my journey.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I know I just said like all of these sad things, but there is beauty in the wilderness. Like, there's danger. I'm only 30, and I also experienced violence and threats and all of these other terrible things, but there is beauty in the wilderness, that being your true authentic self and coming into different spaces with different people, you do bring that unique experience, and people really respond to authentic people. Having been sort of, I don't want to say my hand was forced, but it a little bit was. Having that experience of being my true authentic self is why I decided to start training people to do that themselves, because we all have our own unique perspectives. We all have our own unique selves that we can bring into the different communities and just create more joy.
Thank you. You know, you've all had, well, I think a wide variety of experiences. We have some that didn't have the language um, when they were first born, and having to learn all this new language as it came out over the last, I believe Rich said 50 years. That is not what I would guess. Black does not crack. I will say that proudly on this call. But, you know, just seeing that and then having people that are able to live in their authenticity today and not having to separate being Black or queer, being able to be Black and queer, you know, that's something that's, I think, inspirational, be able to be your most authentic self. And, you know, that sort of brings up a question for me, you know, a question that sort of goes off my list, but what has it been like to go from having to separate out those different parts of your identities to being able to be all at once, to be able to be your most authentic self? Has that been, I guess, a transformational experience for you, or do you still see more work needing to be done so that you can reach that most authentic part?
I want to jump in. I want to jump in because the subject of joy came up, and I just, you know, the subject of joy came up, and I really don't want to give the impression like my history, you know, there's the collective history of people, of brown people in this country is, you know, collectively not very pleasant. But in spite of that, I think there's always been a spirit of joy. And I think the same can be, you know, said for, you know, the same can be said for queer people. But it's so interesting because I don't think anybody's ready for me. I don't think anybody's ready for me. I don't think, like, you know, the queer community is really ready for me. I don't think the Black community is really ready. I don't think anyone's really ready for me. When I tap into my joy, when I tap into what really gets me turned on, really gets me excited, nobody's really ready for that. And I have to pursue that. So I think getting out of the, you know, again, getting out of that binary of queer, straight, you know, Black, white, whatever, breaking out of that boundary, those, you know, those boundaries, and what does it really mean to experience my authentic self when I'm really being authentic? None of those labels fit.
Yeah. I think that calling us back to joy was so needed and important. I think one of the ways anti-Blackness and queer and trans oppression is forwarded is by only framing Black queer people as dead or dying, right? Like, it's the master narrative of our lives in the public imagination. Like, that's all we do. When we don't, and when I think about being authentic, I think about not having a choice. Like, it was either this or bust. Like, you know, it was, you know, I felt ripped at the seams my first year of undergrad. Like, I just was in such distress, trying to reconcile and make sense of what it meant to be Black and queer simultaneously. There was no choice. I also was raised in a family full of people who were very bold, like, who were very loud and unapologetic. And, you know, when you enter into white higher education spaces, those things aren't valued, right? When you curse in class, because that's how you talk and that's how your family talks, those things aren't valued, but it's like, oh, well, you know, I remember being a freshman and I would go to parties on campus and I would get on tables and take my clothes off and dance. And people would be like, well, we all thought you were stupid. I was like, why? Because I came to this party and turned up? Like, that's why we were here. But these are the ways that all these narratives constrict, particularly when you're Black and first gen, and you may feel an urge to perform smart, right? To perform belonging. And so I don't know how else to be. And that's come at a cost. And to bring us back to joy, it's been worth every second. Like, because I can't imagine, like I sit in class, like I'm a PhD student, I sit in class to this day and still curse. Like, oh, well, I'm here, right? I curse when I teach, I curse in trainings, like that's who I am, that's how I talk. And, you know, we have to be real about what that means for our safety and potential mobility in our careers. And I also say like flat out refusal to engage. Like that's other people's businesses, not mine.
Yes, yes. You just said performing smart. And when I started college, I performed that. I hit that smart button so hard. I came in and I was like, I have my little books. I have my button-up tees. I am going to just nail this. And I also hit that straight button really hard because I had some drama in high school where like the administration was threatening me for being gay. Because at the time it was still technically a little bit illegal. So I was like, I'm gonna hit that straight button. I'm gonna hit that smart white button. And at some point I was just like, I don't know who I am and I'm self-destructing. And I chose to be my authentic self. And it's been so worth it. It's been worth the various costs to my career. It's been worth it because honestly, I curse like a sailor. This is me dressed up. I got my anime t-shirt on. When I dress up, that means I pulled out the lint roller and got the dog hair off. That's it. I'm gonna do me, and it's been so worth it. However, going back to the original question, there is still work to be done because I'm not always me. I brought up my stylist. I really love my stylist. She does a great job. She also is not a fan of the gays. So I gotta pick these battles sometimes. And it's a daily choice of which battles are worth the fight and which ones are not. This one is not worth the fight.
Thank you all. You know, as I was thinking about that true authenticity, coming to the workplace as who we are, performative actions. I also thought of code switching, things of that nature. You know, one of the things we're all required to do, at least in higher education, is dress a certain way when you're in the office. This shirt is my small act of rebellion, my hair too, you know, all the small things. But, you know, you all said so much that I could continue honestly asking questions just off of that conversation, but I do want to make sure that I serve our audience by addressing some of the topics that we are here today for as a panel. So I'm going to shift gears and go to our next question, which is also sort of about movements. What are some of the connections and differences that you've seen between historical civil rights movements led by communities of color and the Black Lives Matter movement that's ongoing right now? And again, any of our panelists can feel free to be the one to step out. And then if we want to play popcorn, we can.
I can start. I actually, I came across, I was scrolling on Instagram earlier this morning, and a friend of mine, she's Black American, but she's currently living in England, and she does a lot of things around like sustainable fashion, environmentalism, that sort of stuff. And she was talking about, I'm sure you guys have heard the news about Biden wanting to speed along the process of putting Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill. And, you know, and so she put up this video about, you know, how, you know, Black people are not a monolith. And, you know, how she feels like, you know, Harriet Tubman would absolutely hate to be like put on, this currency, but, the NAACP, leadership feels differently. They think it's a great idea. And, to sort of, remind white folks that, we don't all think the same. We don't all agree about everything. And that's one of the things that's so striking to me about the history of our movements. Obviously, like sort of one of the most well-known sort of, and it's framed as a rivalry, right? Because we got to pit Black people against each other, but that's not quite how it was. But one of the most sort of famous rivalries is between MLK, who we're celebrating, and Malcolm X, this idea that they disagreed on tactics, they disagreed on a lot of things. And it's kind of the most well-known, but it's actually so common, because as my friend said, like, we don't all agree on everything, right? And there's, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Son of Baldwin, Robert Jones, who just published a book recently. He says, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's one thing to like disagree on tactics, to disagree on vanilla versus chocolate, but it's something else if you're disagreeing about my humanity, my identities, who I am, right? So when I'm talking about we're not a monolith, we don't all agree, I'm talking about tactics and ideas and the way forward, and not Black people who are transphobic, right? Like that's not what I'm talking about. But the history of our movements is that there's always been you on some bullshit, like I disagree with you, like that's not the way forward. And so these conversations that we continue to have 50, 60, 70 years later are conversations that we continue to have, and I'm really grateful for them. I remember reading last year after John Lewis passed away, that there was a book that was published, I don't remember how long ago, but I think it might have been his, but they talk about how, there was a lot of contention with SNCC when he was a part of SNCC, because there were ideas about, oh, well, should we involve white people? Should white people be allowed to be a part of this organization? And he was for it, and some folks were against it. And so these are the kind of conversations that we continue to have today. And it's actually one of my favorite parts of movement building. Not the arguing itself, but the fact that there's just so much brilliance and so many different ideas about what liberation looks like and how we move forward and what tactics look like. And it's just as true today. I mean, if you're on Twitter, you already know we don't all agree on everything, and I think it's one of our strengths. I think it's powerful, and yeah.
You said a lot of powerful things there, and I say that because so much of what you said is relevant to my own Twitter feed right now. On the Harriet Tubman $20 bill, one of my colleagues, Professor Charles Davis, he shared that abolitionism requires a minimum and anti-capitalist position from which to abolish the violent exploitation of racialized labor. And yet they're using this, they're literally, in this $20 bill, they're literally turning Black labor into literal capital without consent. And then even from the MLK, Malcolm X debate with the Black Lives Matter, when we see people saying MLK wouldn't want this, or Malcolm X would say burn this down. Just arguments, and then you have other people from outside the community also trying to use those arguments against us with our own community members. But that's all I would say, and turn it back over to the panel, because you just gave me so much to think about there.
Yes, I'm so glad you brought up the arguing. Yes, it is in a way powerful, but like Zach just said, people are taking that and using it as a way to weaponize against us, our own arguments and our own progress. Like, the arguments themselves are the same as they've been for decades, but we made it public, and we kind of need to keep it to ourselves, make a decision, and then move. We gotta bring that back home.
Oh, see, if I can interject real quick, I think it's key that we disagree in public and that we do it unapologetically. Like, you know, I think like I always tell people, I miss when Black intellectuals used to have knockout essay back and forth, like for like months at a time, just like essay after essay. Because I think one of the ways that racism constricts us is to say we must be a united front. Well, I don't agree with all Black people, right? Like I don't agree with a Black Secretary of Defense as a means of racial progress, right? Like that's not my version of Black liberation and Black freedom. And the clarity to say that, and our arguments can't revolve around how non-Black people will take them up. Because once again, that's their business. And I think too, and I think a connection, you know, it is MLK week in the celebration. So it would be remiss not to name all the Black women, queer and trans people who are radically erased from civil rights discourse, and drawing that connection to the 3 Black women, 2 of which who are queer, who started the hashtag Black Lives Matter, right? So we even become invested in this male-centric notion of who our leaders are and what they do. And one quick thing on Harriet, I think symbolism symbolism has always been an important tool, right, for our civil rights discourses. And the question is, for me at least, what is the work that symbols do and don't do to get us free, right? Because the material conditions of Black people did not change when Obama was president. They won't change with Kamala Harris as vice president.
Right.
They may become worse in our increasingly neoliberal apparatus, right?
Right.
And so, right, and so I think part of that question is like people are like, oh, I want a Black university president. Well, I don't. I want a president who's going to question anti-Blackness, and I don't really care what body that shows up in, you know, if I'm being honest. And so those are some random collection of thoughts.
I love those thoughts.
Yeah.
It's interesting you just said that. I personally think it's about to get worse for us and in a lot of different communities as well. For instance, I heard today that Biden wants to end sub-minimum wage for people who have disabilities. That sounds really great. That sounds amazing. However, there's a $2,000 cap on people who have disability, like get disability payments. If there's $2,000 in your account, you lose disability, period. So it sounds great. That sounds like a great headline, but the reality is that thousands of people are about to suffer for this sexy headline. So I don't doubt that we're about to see some real steps back.
I think that's absolutely true. And there's a lot I want to touch on that, but I do want to go back to Romeo for just a moment here. One thing you mentioned were the leadership of Black Lives Matter movement. And in my own experience, one of the things I've noticed, you know, we still celebrate to this day, you know, all the Black male civil rights leaders from the 1960s, 70s, and 50s. But even in 2021, you know, we're only 26 days in the year, but that doesn't matter. Even in 2021, you know, when you talk about who's in charge of Black Lives Matter, who's the leaders, who's at the forefront, those groups, the 3 Black queer women are still erased from that conversation, and they're still not brought up. So what can we do to sort of ensure that as we get, you know, 40 more years down the line, that their memory, their history is just as celebrated as what we're celebrating today? Do you have any thoughts on that? If you don't, you know, I understand.
Oh, I always have thoughts. Well, I'll say first and foremost, like I think civil rights discourse will become absorbed into US obsessionalism stuff, right? I mean, that's what happens with Martin Luther King, right? Who had a scathing critique of US imperialism and capitalism and the white moderate. I mean, like scathing, like talk about a clarity, right, of the global threat of US empire across the world. But he becomes reduced to I have a dream, right? These 3 Black women become reduced to Black Lives Matter as their only intervention. And so like part of it is just to read the things,
Yeah.
right? Is to take the more complicated route that we don't get, right? Like I like, you know, in school, in my own schooling, it was like MLK, I have a dream speech. Rosa Parks sat on a bus because she was tired. Rosa Parks was a veteran activist, like who made a strategic choice, right? Like Rosa Parks started organizing against sexual violence against Black women in the South. That like Rosa Parks was not a tired Black woman who just didn't give up her seat because she was exhausted.
Right.
I mean, beyond the ways that all of us who are Black are exhausted.
Right.
But that's like, so part of that is to read and to name, right? And to say it here, right? Like your version of Rosa Parks is probably inaccurate.
I'm gonna jump on. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just gonna just piggybacking off of what Remy was saying. Romeo, sorry. For me, I think that is one of the biggest reasons why educators, community educators, are so important, because they stand in that gap, right? Like we go to elementary school or, you know, homeschooled or whatever, and we learn this very flattened version of our history, if we learn our history at all, right? And community educators stand in that gap outside of, you know, sort of the, right, because there's the education system, right, which we know is inherently anti-Black, anti-queer, anti-fat, ableist, et cetera, et cetera. But there are, one of the things that I learned outside of the classroom as an undergrad is that education can exist outside of what we consider, right, like a narrow view of what is education, what is a teacher, what should a classroom look like, who can be students, right? And I learned that very early on. That's what so much of my own personal education as an activist came from. And it's why it's so important for us to stand in the gap, because there's so much that we aren't going to learn, and that you're never going to learn. You know, you can have radical teachers, radical principals, and what have you. At the end of the day, they're always going to be constricted by the system to a certain extent, because it doesn't want us to learn these things. It doesn't want us to be radicalized. It doesn't want us to know the truth, right? Being lied to, like we've been lied to for the last 4 years, is really nothing new. We're constantly being lied to, and seeking the truth always has to happen outside of the paradigms that we've been given. So shout out to community educators. It's really important work. I wouldn't be where I am today without it. And I'm grateful to do that work. So yeah.
I'm gonna jump
Definitely. Oh, go ahead.
I'm gonna jump
sorry.
in. I'm gonna jump in just because there are so many things that have been shared that I just want to get excited about. You know, first of all, Romeo, I love that you brought up, that you put in context Martin Luther King, and there's this, like, you know, I don't know, forgive me, there's this kind of Uncle Tom version of Martin Luther King spreading love. The I Have a Dream speech wasn't even the speech he intended to give on the steps on that day. He had done the I Have a Dream speech in Detroit, you know, a couple of weeks before, and he started his speech, and somebody shouted out, "You should do the dream speech," because he was floundering. And so he went into the I Have a Dream speech, and this becomes the, you know, the iconic representation of Martin Luther King, who, you know, shortly thereafter gave the speech on Vietnam, and the speech about moderates as well, but on Vietnam, where he talked about, you know, the three-headed monster of militarism, basically capitalism, and basically racism. And I'm really, really paraphrasing. I should know it better than that. But it was a scathing critique of America. And then very shortly after that, he was assassinated. So that's not an accident. But another issue is that with civil rights and Black Lives Matter, there's an assumption that, okay, the civil rights movement was every person who was involved in the liberation of Black people. People have been, that movement, that energy is in the body of every oppressed person who is identified as Black. It doesn't have to be encapsulated in this idea of something called civil rights. And so by labeling that work as, oh, if you knew Martin Luther King, then you were a civil rights activist. Nobody mentioned Bayard Rustin. Nobody mentions Bayard Rustin as well. I mean, along with Rosa Parks, the fact that Bayard Rustin was, identified as a gay man, was open. And because of that, was really pushed to the rear in terms of identification with that movement. But Bayard Rustin was the hype man for the March on Washington, was the person who introduced A. Philip Randolph, and A. Philip Randolph was supposed to be the star of the March on Washington, not this unknown Reverend Martin Luther King. Not that I'm trying to belittle that idea, but it's just the way certain things get co-opted to become, it's like Haagen-Dazs. It's like the Haagen-Dazs version of the experience of the movement towards Black liberation in this country. And the same is true with Black Lives Matter. I walk around this neighborhood, I'm in Detroit, and I'm a stone's throw from a predominantly white neighborhood. And I walk around and I see Black Lives Matter in all these windows. And I swear, it's like the angel of death in the Bible, when they painted their doors with lamb's blood to keep the angel of death. I feel like, are people wearing Black Lives Matter t-shirt and hashtagging Black Lives Matter because they're afraid that when the Black people really come, they will get them? So there's a lot of wild energy, even to try to, compare those two movements is problematic, because it's like it's not two movements. It's the same movement. There's just, the way it's been put in it, the way it shows up in the grocery store refrigerated section.
Oh my goodness, you are so accurate. I just remember a couple years ago where we locally had a Black Lives Matter march where there were no Black people who organized it. They were invited to the march, but there were no Black people that organized it. And I think going back to talking about like finding out that true history, reading and writing, what's necessary is for us all to cultivate a culture of lifelong learning, a culture of questioning what it is we've been taught, and questioning what people's motives are. Going back to the store, Target has this amazing Black History Month section right now. And the designs are lit and I love it so much. But I went to pick up this bag and I said, okay, where did these profits go? And who did this labor? And gorgeous bag. But it was designed, it was a design contest specifically targeting Black students at HBCUs. And it's like, okay, so you're not gonna pay them, you just made sure to target Black students this time. Like, we have to cultivate this thirst for knowledge and not just accepting what it is that people tell us.
I really appreciate what you just said, and it sort of connects back to what you said earlier about the disability payments and how if you do increase that minimum wage amount, you can end up cutting what they're allowed to have ultimately, even though it's a nice highlight, you're missing the lowlights. And so in general, I think it's important to challenge everything that we see coming out of these movements. But with that, I want to further explore a little bit about Black Lives Matter and what it means to each of you and what you hope to see it achieve. I know in the past few months, past few years, we've seen the Black Lives Matter be challenged on its inclusiveness of Black trans lives, Black queers lives, Black women, just about everything other than Black men, to be perfectly honest. So for each of you, or those that are open to share on this, What does Black Lives Matter mean to you currently, and what do you hope it achieves moving forward?
I'm gonna jump in real quick. I'm gonna just be very brief. First of all, the term Black Lives Matter, I'm like, no, I don't want my life to matter. I want Black Lives miracles, Black Lives magic. You know what I mean? I want to get out of this, subsistence frame of mind. And I understand, why Black Lives Matter is Black Lives Matter, but we really have to start thinking bigger than that. Like I said, I really, this idea of, my life is, I am magic. I'm magic. And I don't want to just be recognized as like the dominant culture. For me to be here, for my Black ass to be here, took so much ingenuity, so much fortitude, so much cunning. So I just want to be recognized for what I am, which is, again, a miracle. I'm a miracle.
I agree. I was going to say something similar. We get why it's Black Lives Matter, because a lot of people don't recognize that. But that seems like a hashtag not for us. It's for other people to use to describe us. And it is subsistence thinking, which is why I resonate better with the hashtag Black Girl Magic. I'm not even a girl, but yeah, I do have magic. And Black excellence, yeah, everything that I've done has been just amazing. Like, this is more than subsistence, and I want to be recognized for my achievements rather than you're alive, so good job.
I'm glad that that you brought up the idea of magic, because I am a Blitch, Black witch, and of course magic, right? Magic as a concept that we understand from things like Charmed and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, my favorite show of all time, for the record, is something that ancestrally has been a part of us from the before times, from before any of us even landed on these stolen lands. It is a part of our legacy. As someone who practices hoodoo specifically, as an African traditional religion, I am grateful for that knowledge, which is why I'm glad that you brought it up. The idea that, essentially, what y'all are saying is the concept of Black Lives Matter is like the bare minimum, right? That's like when the bar is like all the way on the ocean floor, like obviously our lives matter. But we are so much more than that. And we have so much more in us, so much more that is authentically ours, that is our birthright, that gives us, right, that ingenuity that you talked about comes from somewhere. It didn't just materialize. It came from the mojo bags, and it came from, the Florida water, and so much magic in us, in our ancestors, that has propelled us forward and propelled our movements forward. And so for me, Black Lives Matter is a stepping stone, right? Like, it's not the goal. It's not, oh, Black Lives Matter now, we're done. Like, that's not how it works. There is so much more work to be done beyond it. And so obviously, you know, I'm grateful for Alicia Garza, for everyone who has started this movement, for their predecessors in the 50s and the 40s, their predecessors before that, Ida B. Wells and Frederick Douglass, and you know, you know, as someone said, like, this has always been the work. I think it was Reg. This has always been the work. It's not new. I'm forever grateful, but there's still so much more to go. And after 400 years, we're still at the very base ocean floor. Like, you know, I'm laughing, but obviously it's not funny, you know. But there's so much more to go, and I'm excited. I probably will not live to see it, because there's so much more to go, so much further to go. But as an ancestor, eventually, I'm looking forward to the day when we are um, beyond the baseline, and remembering who and what we are, and the power that we possess.
I'm gonna go to a heady place real quick, if that's okay. And really talk about, because I think what everyone has hit on is kind of this social political place that Black people exist, right? Really due to the slave Atlantic trade, right? Like, you took millions of people and made them into property to be bought and sold, to be used as cattle, right? As livestock, right? Like, that is what happened to Black people globally. And that is not different to our contemporary reality. So yeah, formalized chattel slavery is over, but at the end of the day, Black people are still viewed as property. Think about the casual ways in which Black death is just streamed. A Black person gets shot, you just see it everywhere. I mean, a white guy is being tried for sexual violence, and like blur out his face, bleep his name, hide his mama. It is wild. Like, that is what we are, like we are not viewed as human, right? That is what we are trying to counter. And you know, the bar is on the ocean floor, it's in hell, like, mattering is like the basic, but yet remains impossible because of capitalism. Property can't matter. And when you think of Black people as property, it becomes impossible, right? It becomes impossible. And so even as we have tokens who are uplifted into positions of power, right? And as someone who's been used and tried to be deployed as a token, right? Like, let's be clear, like, I've been used and tried to be deployed that way as a token, right? Around racial uplift. And you're like, I lucked out. Like, we have to get clarity about that. Like, I lucked out. Like, I was blacking out at parks when I was 15, like skipping school, and never had an interaction with the carceral state. That's just luck. Like, that is just luck. And so part of this and for Black life to matter, non-Black people get their stuff together first. Like, you know, there's this move to be like, we need to understand the Black experience. You need to understand your own experience, because most of your identity and who you are was constructed to be the antithesis of Blackness. And so, like, if we want Black life to matter, that has to be the starting part. And I think, as everyone has beautifully said, that is so far the bare minimum. Like, the fact that that phrase even got the backlash it got when it was first uttered speaks to the visceral hate of Black life in this country. That a simple phrase like Black Lives Matter took 3 to 4 years to come into mainstream discourse, to then be commodified, but different story for different day. Like,
Yeah, I want to just what you said. I've been having that same thought. I hope my sound is okay. I've been having the same thought about how you can see a Black person actually die on video any day of the week. It's like a snuff film. And I've been watching my entire life, I've been watching dying Black people on screen. It started with, Care, where they would show, the African children dying of starvation in probably the most resourced continent on the planet dying of starvation. And from there right on down the line, we get to see any day of the week, we get to see marketed for the and I don't know who's watching these things, who is watching these things, but that's how, I mean, could you imagine if you could you imagine? And I don't, like, first of all, I don't even really get into the term whiteness, because what does that really mean? I mean, does anybody actually identify as white comfortably? But could you imagine seeing white people being murdered on the news for any reason, but being murdered on the news? But we see Black bodies murdered routinely.
Yeah, even if you think about the Capitol riots and the one woman who was shot, they didn't release her photo. We don't know what she looked like. And hopping off of what Romeo said, non-white people do need to understand their own situation before they try to understand ours. And one of those pieces is how whiteness, we'll just use whiteness, but it's really everybody. It's really every non-Black person, how our bodies are used to support their lifestyles. We have legal slavery. The only case of legal slavery is when someone's been in prison. So all these California fires are being fought by Black prisoners. And they get maybe what, 10 cents? So it's technically not slavery, but that's slavery. Like, we need to understand how these pieces support our current lifestyle.
Thank you all for that. I think the best response to say that those are some very sombering answers, even for me, because those are the same thoughts that I have on the Black Lives Matter movement. I see corporations, industry, universities co-opting the Black Lives Matter statement as a signal of peace. But it's like, well, you got the bones of slaves and indigenous people in some of your college museums. You know, you won't even return that to folks. So, you know, I think there's a lot of challenges there. And Reg, I really like what you said about Black magic, Black miracle. So that's something that's probably going to stick with me, because, you know, I support Black Lives Matter, but I wish it was something different, because it does feel like the bare minimum. Like our lives are more than just something worth mattering. And, you know, I think there is some growth that we all appear to want to see in this movement. But as we're thinking about that, you know, we are here today now in this current context where we need to find ways to get non-Black people on board with just a simple message of Black Lives Matter. And then we get them to the part where it's like Black lives are magic, or Black lives are miracles, or whatever the case is, and however we want to phrase it as we move forward. So how can non-Black people, both in higher education and extension, or even community work, better support racial equity and Black Lives Matter? I want to specify, say non-Black people, because that means anyone that is not part of this Black African-American diaspora. Doesn't matter what country you're from, or if you're European ancestry or something else. If you're not part of the Black diaspora, this is sort of reaching out to those people.
Money. Money. Advocating for reparations, donating to local Black Lives Matter chapters, donating to HBCUs, going to somebody's little Twitter and Instagram bio and putting a little something in the Cash App, like money. And not out of a sense of like, ooh, Black capitalism, like, fuck that. Like, I hate Black capitalism, so I can't, like, LLC Twitter, like, I cannot stand them, like, but what I'm talking about is the fact that we have to survive under capitalism, right? And as long as we are forced to survive under it, we are gonna need the resources. So money. That is my short answer. Wherever you can source money directly to Black people, right? Directly to Black people, directly to the folks doing the work on the ground. That is what you should be doing with your own pockets. That is what you should be advocating your grandparents to do. That is what you should be advocating your school to do. That is what you should be advocating politicians to do. Money. And that's it.
I agree, Denari, I agree with you. And not just about where you send funds, but making choices where not to spend your funds, and not just your money, but like your existence, like having a zero tolerance policy for ignorance in your life and educating yourself and making sure that your friends aren't, you know, living to exploit. Because I think that, you know, the racism that we see, like the I don't want to get political, but the people that we saw storming the Capitol were they were fertilized among a community of people who are shocked to see them, but made it possible for them to exist. You know what I mean? There's no stores. There are stores that, you know, have their religious freedom not to make a cake for a queer couple, but I don't hear about the stores that are refusing to serve racist.
No, that is there, right? That's it. Like, you know, those folks are going back to mostly all white communities that nurtured, right? That nurtured and allowed, didn't intervene, didn't educate, even, right? If you're like, well, I just don't agree with them. You know, speaking of MLK, right? The danger of the white moderate, like, is always very salient, right? It's there's good and bad people on both sides. It's the like, well, they're still good people. It's the, oh, like they got a Black partner and so therefore they can't be racist. You know, it is all these, it's the way in higher education we agree to disagree, right? We say, right? We say we have to somehow legitimize people bringing mock border walls to our campuses, as if a campus can't say, I can't stop you because we're a public entity, but this is a gross violation of our values, right? We are culpable always already. And that has to be the starting part. Like, good white people, like, well, I don't know what a good non-Black person is. Like, bad starting place. I think also, like, for me, like, I'm big on critical self-reflection. I think we have to start by saying, for non-Black people, how have I been socialized to understand Black people? What's my first interaction with Black people? Did you grow up watching Black people on Jerry Springer and that's how you view Black people? Like, that matters, right? How has my own identity been formed by the belief that at least I'm not Black? Right, these are serious questions that we all have to grapple with. What message did your mama and your daddy, your grandma, and your aunts give you about Black people when they watch TV? All these are important self-reflection questions to get us to a place that I think often can become missed, right? Like you gotta start with the self. You gotta understand how we come to understand people we imagine as the other, always. That's always how I start. What's your racial identity and how did you come to know it? Right, like, right, because I think, Reg, you're so right to say, do white people identify as white comfortably? But no, they don't. I remember teaching, and I talk about white people as a social group, and white students like were lashing out in evaluations like, Romeo was reducing us. Like, well, you are white. That's the box you checked. So that's all I'll say about that.
I'm gonna hop on that one. I think that self-reflection goes back to that lifetime learning. Like, you have to be willing to continue to learn and to continue to broaden your wealth of knowledge about things that you think you knew. I have a habit, if anybody ever tells me I don't see race, and I would say, okay, if you woke up Black tomorrow, how would you feel? They'll never feel good about that. So why? You got to go in and you got to figure out why it is you would not want to wake up Black tomorrow, or some people do say yes because they're like, I want the music and the good clothes, and I can wear yellow and look cute, like Romeo over here. But like, what is it? What are the pieces of media, these pieces of education that inform those decisions? Like, you have to be willing to be a student your whole life. You just have to.
So, we've heard a few things. We heard one, giving money back to Black communities in different forms and fashion. Two, challenging not critiquing, just looking at where you are sending your money now and who's actually receiving it and who's benefiting from that money. We also heard of self-reflection and, critiquing your own lifestyle and looking at what are the values that your family instilled in you or taught you about when you were growing up. And then also taking the time to learn. And Remy, you keep giving me the next bridge to the next question. So we are about to touch on learning right now. And then I would just add, there's also not being afraid to critique your friends and family that are the problematic ones. If you're not critiquing those that are problematic around you, you are just as problematic. But with that education piece and being open to learn, we do have some audience questions that have been shared with me. And I do want to take some time to address those because we are nearing the end of this panel discussion. So the first question that we have, again, these are anonymous questions, so I do not know who they come from. But this question reads, as someone who's trying to further educate myself on a history that I wasn't taught in school, I am always at the crossroads of trying not to lean too heavily on Black and queer individuals to teach me their history, but also wanting to hear individual stories and history that may not be taught otherwise. Any advice on how to balance these two? I have an answer.
I was like, memoirs are great. People talk about their life on YouTube every day, all day. And I think we have, particularly in higher education, we have overemphasized the importance of a single story, right? We have overemphasized the way it's like, oh, go talk to Romeo about their Black queer experience as part of your learning process, because without them, you'll never know. Well, Black, queer, and trans people have written beautiful books about their life, like that I learned from. I mean, Janet Mock's memoir is great. All Boys Aren't Blue recently came out. Maya Angelou's memoir. We have memoirs and autobiographies for days. And I would just really encourage people to engage those and engage all these videos of Black queer people walking through their life. Because the thing is that when you engage me or any marginalized person that way, we're already in a deficit. It's already requiring time and energy, even if we say no. So even if and that has to be an open conversation with the people in your life. Like, I got tons of people, I got lots of white people in my life, for better or worse. And I'm like, I ain't talking to you about this. I ain't talking to you about that. I don't care how long I've known you. I've known some of these people for years. My longest mentor to this day is a white woman. And there's just I'm like, but it's always there. And so I think there's ways to get at, if you enter into justice work through personal experience, there's ways to still get that. This I'll say lastly, and being clear that those people may not have an analysis to understand their whole world and right? Like, just because I'm Black does not mean I have an analysis of anti-Blackness, right? Or that I know how to position my own personal experience in the world within a system and structure, right? That's a different skill set as well. So also we shouldn't assume that every person who has a marginalized identity is able to articulate, name that in a particular way to be accessible to get us closer towards justice.
And I just wanted to really quick piggybacking off of that / piggybacking off of what I said earlier a few moments ago, is that, by seeking that work out, you are again monetarily supporting Black folks. We have books, we have YouTube channels that are monetized. Like, go support that instead of bothering us. Like, it's that simple.
Thank you both for that. And there's a question that came up that sort of springs off of what Romeo just shared. Does it feel like you're a token or that you're being asked too much when you're requested to do panels such as this today? And how do you navigate when you accept or reject these opportunities?
Well, can I hop on this one? I have been the token my whole life. Token anime black girl, token this, token that. Well, first I chose this panel, yes, because I like the people who were putting it on. And I know that they were gonna do a good job of vetting the other panelists, vetting the questions, and sort of getting us focused, you know? So basically, I decided is this a token moment or is this an actual real teaching moment? Second, like I must be compensated. Like I don't do stuff for free because my time is valuable. I got businesses to run and I work a full-time job. I got to do this. So going back to that last question, if you asking people for their story and their information, you got to compensate them because that's hella work. That's a lot of emotional work. They got to decide what to say and what not to say. So yeah, I guess it really comes down to those two things for me.
Thank you.
I don't do things anymore where I'm the only Black person. So here's the thing too. Like I said yes to this panel because of who's on this panel. That was it. Like I was like, well, great. I ain't got to speak for everybody. And as you have seen, we have very different diversion and entry points into the questions you've asked. And that's the beauty of Black Queer Life. But often it becomes Romeo, come speak for all Black, queer, and trans people. And I just flat out, you're like, no. So, I mean, is it tokenizing? Who knows? I mean, sure, it's always probably is a little bit. And also, how are you compensating people? I'm getting something from this. And I'll say for marginalized people on this, who are here, who are asked to do these things often, knowing when to say no is critical. Like, I know we all feel special and like, we're like these unicorns in the world who, you know, we got to speak for all the other unicorns. Girl, we truly do not. Like, it's truly okay to say no.
You know, I'm glad that you touched on the panel. Who was part of the panel? Because, you know, that was actually my first question when I asked. So moderator, I was like, who's on this panel? Because I don't want to be represented in a bad panel. I need to know it's going to be something that I'm happy to be a part of. But, you know, as we move forward, there are a few more questions and we are, you know, time has really flown by today. So I do want to get some of these other questions in. One of our audience members has asked, they're interested in hearing the panelists' opinion on whispered allyship, and they're describing that as being when folks send their private emails or have side chats and affirming statements made by Black folks, challenging structures in meetings, but not making those same affirming statements in public. So essentially those conversations we have in committee meetings, departmental meetings, but those same things that they're not saying when they leave their workplace or saying publicly on their own Twitter feeds or whatever the case goes. How do you feel about that type of allyship? Is it useful? Is it just a waste of time? Is it performative?
I want to talk to this. I want to just give an example from my life. And first of all, forgive me, my computer decided that it was going to update all of a sudden. But in terms of that question, I'll just give you an example. I was working at an organization that was so progressive. It was so progressive. And they wanted to make sure that there was representation. We were working with youth primarily from, you know, I want to say low income families, although a lot of those kids didn't think of themselves as low income. It was just the income that people in their community had learned to live on, which is another thing about allyship. What do you go home to, and where the people that you consider yourself allies of go home to? Which goes back to the question of money and where money goes, which is also a question about, you know, doing this work and getting compensated fairly. You know, when I'm on panels and I think to myself, who on this, when I look on the panel, where are they going home to?
And what am I going home to? But then the other, so this, to go back to the story, this progressive group, you know, I thought this is a safe space. In fact, my boss would ask me specific questions around race. And I got very good at reading my boss to know what was safe to say and what not to say. And what I ended up doing in that case was reinforcing their narrow view of what it meant to be an ally and what it meant to be progressive. And I found out the hard way because I actually started to have a conversation with that same individual about some analysis that I had found myself doing around the fact that, you know, when we bring these young kids that we're working with around the people who support them, we keep them very separate. And it's almost as if we're selling poor people to rich people. I was told to fuck off, and 3 days later I was fired. So being an ally means that you have to be willing to hear the things that you don't want to hear about yourself. That's what I'll say about that based on my personal experience.
I've been there and done that, and got the pink slips and the t-shirt. About this whisper allyship, did you ask people of the community? Did you ask one person? Did you just have one yes man? If the answer is I have one yes man, you're not doing anything. Then with this allyship, does it create an impact? When you are talking to people, are they making real material changes in the environment? If the answer is no, that ain't doing nothing. Are you just hitting people up with thoughts and prayers on Facebook message? You keep your thoughts and prayers. We got our own. We got our own.
I guess for me, what comes up for me is the idea of silence as complicity. To me, the first thing that the kind of visceral reaction I had to the question was like, well, that's not an ally. Like, if you whisper in it, like, a whisper. First of all, I've never heard of this phrase, whisper allyship. I've never heard of that. But I love it because it's rooted in reality, right? Because that's how some people are. But to me, that's not real allyship. And for me, that's not to say that those private conversations aren't important. You know, like, you know, we always talk, you know, around the holidays, oh, you're going home to your racist uncle and like confronting him, right? That's not happening in public, but that work is still important. But the public is also important, right? It's a both and. And for me, when you're just doing the private stuff, right? And a lot of celebrities kind of take this, oh, well, I'm doing it in private. You don't see how I'm working behind the scenes. But if you're not doing shit publicly, for me, then that signals that there's a concern about how you're going to be perceived. It's a concern about losing social capital, about losing financial capital, right? Especially for celebrities. Well, I can't say anything in public because then I'm going to lose followers. I'm going to, you know, lose potential revenue or whatever. And even for folks who aren't celebrities, right? Because most of us are not celebrities. There is an investment in a niceness, right? And I hate niceness. I love kindness. Kindness is wonderful. Niceness is quite frankly dangerous. And you know, in order to do this work, you can't be nice. Like, nobody got time to be nice. Nobody got energy to be nice. This is the work. And so for me, I would say, you know, and obviously it's a challenge. You know, there are places in my life in which I am privileged, right? And it's a nuanced conversation. Not many, most of my identities are marginalized, but there are a few, right? And so I understand you know, that these conversations are hard. And really, for me, it's about integrity and character, right? Who are you? How are you showing up in the world? How are you showing up authentically? What are you standing for? And how committed are you to what you stand for? And if you're not committed, then do you really stand for that? Like, right? Like, we're talking about integrity, we're talking about character. And for me, that's what it ultimately comes down to. Who are you? Who versus who do you say you are? And so that public aspect is an important part of the work. And so if you are not doing it or you're struggling to do it, you know, kind of going back to the previous question, that's something else that you need to be analyzing and doing some self-reflection on.
Thank you. You know, we're at 1:25 p.m., so I'm going to be respectful of everyone's time. We don't have time for a big follow-up question for our audience, so I just want to ask our panelists, are there any final comments or thoughts that you would like to share with our audience today?
Yes, I would like to sort of backtrack a little bit on my last statement. Because in part of my courses, I do teach that you do have to have that whispered allyship. You do have to go home to your racist uncle, and you do have to tell your uncle you're right, he being real racist right now, and to calm it down. Because sorry, that go my bit, whatever. One of the things that I believe is that people are radicalized when they are isolated from society. And a lot of the Capitol rioters, in my opinion, had already been cut off by their family members. They didn't have that person to tell them they going on the crazy train, you should probably stop. So that is part of the work, but that's not enough. So I did want to backtrack a little bit of what I said, because this is something that I do teach people to do, but it's really just not enough.
Thank you.
I want to jump in. I want to jump in on that one. It's not even a question about, you know, allyship with Blackness or queerness. And there's so many other intersections, right? I'm clinically, bipolar and on the spectrum, and all these other things that and I actually identify as a crazy queer Black radical atheist, right? And that's like the short list. But I would say the thing that I would love people to leave with, and this is probably going to be the scariest thing you ever do, is start questioning everything. Like, first of all, who decided that you could own the earth? And once you start with that question and follow that, everything else starts to fall into place. Who decided that it was acceptable to own the earth?
I just wanted to share deep gratitude and appreciation for my co-panelists. This has been a great, lovely conversation. I'm leaving with a lot. So I just want to share some love with y'all. That's my final thing.
I guess I just wanted to definitely share gratitude. Thank you to the folks who showed up, who came to learn, who by being in the space practicing some of what we were talking about earlier. But I also just wanted to address a question that we didn't get to, because I feel like some people might wonder, well, what does this have to do with what I'm doing, right? With the work that I'm doing. And for me, when it comes to agriculture, there's so many layers, right? And we got like 30 seconds, so I can't cover everything. But when you think about this panel in the work that you're doing, the schoolwork that you're doing, to think about environmental racism, to think about the ways that anti-Blackness has impacted farmers, to think about climate change and the way that that impacts Black communities in particular, not just in the colonized US, but around the world, to think about disability and access to food, to think about fat antagonism and which bodies are viewed as valuable, and food moralizing, what foods are looked at as bad and good, and who is creating that narrative. As Red said, question everything. And that is what I would leave y'all with as far as kind of thinking about, like, in your circles, what the kind of work that you're doing, and how this all ties into all of that.
Thank you so much for that closing thought. I'm glad you touched back on that question. 'Cause I definitely wanted us to touch on it, but there's so many other conversations we could have today. I think this panel can go another 2 hours if we really wanted it to. But I want to say thank you to all of our panelists. When I say y'all are aspirational, I really mean that. You are going to be hard people for us to reach as we try to evolve ourselves and our ways of thinking and understanding about the world. And we truly appreciate you taking the time to be here with us in the College of Agriculture and College of Health and Human Sciences. It was an honor to moderate for you today, to engage in discussion with you. And now it's my time to pass this mic back over to Ayanna Bledsoe, who will be giving us a closing message.
This was amazing. Like, y'all like gave me some life that I did not know I needed today. So it was really, y'all just, I don't even have the words for it. Like, you guys have refilled my cup, and I needed it. So thank you very much for everything that you did today.
Ayanna, if I can just touch on that, like, I have learned so much from all of you today, and I knew I would be taking away so much from today's discussion, just with everything that Sky's talked to us about, but I even got even more. And it just honestly, there were some times I was in tears. I was glad my camera wasn't on. So thank you so much for liberating me as well.
But I just want to let everyone else in the room, you all also panelists are welcome to join us tomorrow if you're interested. We have some more sessions to continue this conversation over the course of this week around social movements and what they're looking like today, and how we're seeing, modern manifestations of generations long struggles that people have been going on, have been struggling with, and you all spoke to some of that today. So we'd love to see you tomorrow. Let us know if you want a link, but also to let our attendees know that we have another event tomorrow at noon, and we'd love to see you there. It'll be a really good time, similar to the one today and the one yesterday. So please continue to engage with us, ask questions. If you have a question that you weren't able to ask in this session, feel free to email that to either myself, Sky, Nick, Carmen, and we can try to pass those on to folks to see if there's some additional questions that you have. So thank you all very much for coming. And I would say enjoy the weather, but it's like freezing, raining. I don't know what it's like. It's a mess outside. So probably don't go out there because it's nasty, but enjoy the day. Yeah, thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.